is about 7:05. So thank you everyone for your patience with me. I know we had to cancel last month's meeting, and I sent out material yesterday that I tried to include red lines and clean versions. I printed just cleaner versions of the ordinance, but I did bring some red lines so you could see where some of the changes came from. But before we jump into that, we have a couple of sets of minutes that we need some action on, so I included those in what I sent last night as well. So we have May 13th, 2025 draft minutes.
Motion to approve.
Okay, I've got a motion from Barbara and a second from Bruce. Does anyone have any corrections or changes to those minutes of May 13th?
Nope.
All right, then all those in favor of approval of minutes as presented?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it passes. And then we have minutes of June 17th. If, I'd entertain a motion to,
I'll make a motion to approve.
okay,
I abstain.
okay.
I wasn't here.
To abstain. I'll second that motion.
I'll vote for them, they look cogent, you don't have to be present to vote on minutes.
So David made the motion, I seconded the motion, for approval of all those in favor of June 17th.
Aye.
Aye.
And then, Evelyn and Bruce, well, those opposed, and then abstentions. Evelyn and Bruce. Okay. So, items for review and for discussion, and if folks read the minutes, so where we left things on June 17th was, and I tried to make sure was documented and reflected in the minutes, were some items that we had discussed, the major points for trying to gain consensus on moving forward on a couple of the, what we thought were the significant talking points in how we presented the ordinance. So some of the items that we discussed was open space being mandatory versus mandatory with the discretion to waive. The consensus of folks at the meeting at that point was that over a certain size threshold, we would continue to make this mandatory. Under the current ordinance, we had mandatory over 20 acres in size. So I've prepared something that, drafted and kept that similar language. And if anyone wants to, chime in or ask questions, or we can talk about, and no final decisions were made clearly on June 17th. It was just sort of consensus of those of us who were present at that time. We discussed a yield plan versus a calculation. There were concerns that we went through and discussed sort of the pros and cons of each method. The members present didn't have a clear preference, but acknowledged that the year plan, that if the yield plan methodology is used, then we need to make clear that financial feasibility is in the calculation. I went ahead with this with a yield plan and tried to, within draft development regulations, put some more solid criteria. I think still need some more review and discussion on that. But the discussion and the approach was that there's no good way to determine the density, and so the yield plan seemed that it's keeping with what the current ordinance is, but hopefully cleaning up and making it a little bit clearer of a concern. And then we had a discussion about the open space composition. And I think we had agreed on 50% being the right number. I think right now we have 40% and 50%. I think 50% being the right number. There is discussion on whether it should be based on the overall tract area or the buildable area. We didn't come up with a real consensus, but we did want to make sure that the open space contained uplands not be all unbuildable area. So I did spend some time in trying to really create and establish what those open space standards are and what can and can't be part of the calculation. We didn't want for all the open space to be just junk land, but we also wanted to make sure that the open space includes those high value wetland resources, wildlife quarters, other things. So that was sort of where we left things June
You
17th.
said also open space should contain some upland areas and.
Yes, yeah, we want to make sure that there's a minimum amount of upland
Yes.
in the open space area. So with that, with sending out a whole bunch of very confusing red lines last night, and we had gone back and forth in trying to encompass everything within the zoning ordinance versus keeping the zoning ordinance more high level and then the development regulations being to sort of supplement. I kept it in that same direction, and again, these are just things that I've put out there as trying to get us a work product to move forward and talk about a little bit more. So there's a one page, like both sides, open space developments 5.25 would be the zoning ordinance that would really be trying to establish the purpose and objectives. I took what David written for some of the purpose, the goals and objectives of what we're trying to accomplish here, and tried to clean up some areas where we had some inconsistencies, and keep this as a fairly straightforward, simple zoning that enables this, requires this for parcels over a certain size, sets the thresholds for what we're trying to achieve here, and then we'll leave the more technical stuff for the development regulations and for the planning board to handle in that. I still think that if we're gonna present amendments to the zoning ordinance to the planning board, that we should have at least a draft of those. So that's why I provided the additional development regulation standards for us to discuss, so we can present things as a package to the planning board when we're ready to complete our work. So with a very lengthy introduction from me on all of this, I wanna get some input from people, see if anyone's had an opportunity to review the ordinance language and get some initial thoughts and feedback.
First of all, I'd just like to say, I think you did a great job reorganizing this stuff and
Okay.
putting this first draft together. A lot of the stuff that you rearranged, I think, did add clarity
Okay,
in some of these sections, so, yeah.
okay, good.
There's maybe a couple of things, well, there's some things I have comments on, but some I just have questions on.
Sure.
It's not really challenging, I'm just looking for understanding.
Before David speaks, can you help me understand what I'm looking at with this one versus?
So that's just a red line version of this. This is the clean, but I wanted to show.
So is
that-
this stuff you took out or
That's,
added
that's
or
what I took out of,
is highlighted?
so.
Yeah.
Do I really even
You
wanna
don't
look at
even,
this?
I don't think you even wanna look at
You don't
it.
have to, but it's
I,
like, that's why.
it's in case you wanted to be like, well, did you just create this? I wanted to show that these were some deletions, basically the highlight.
The highlights are
was
the
deleted,
deletion.
deletions, and then the
it
red
was
line is the
reworked.
insertion.
Okay,
And it was reworked, but
Okay.
this is a clean version of that.
okay.
I don't know, I tend to like to see how things were being manipulated, so because that's how my brain works, I probably gave more information than what everybody would necessarily want.
No,
Oh,
but-
it's good.
See, David,
That's how it came to the
David, I'm a little
conclusion
scared if
that-
you and I are working, our brains are working in the same way, that's.
That's how I came to the conclusion that you'd done a good job with the rearrangement, because that, yeah.
Excellent,
Anyway.
okay.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Sorry, David, I interrupted, but I wanted to be able to put this away.
Yeah, some of that I had emailed last night, so the extra, the stuff you have in front of you are the clean versions.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I wanna do the same thank you, because I think this cleaned up a lot. And it's hard when you do the red line and whatever, and it's,
Yeah.
no, just accept every change and print
Yeah.
that one out, That's- I found that one. But I wonder if the planning
Well,
board,
David, I interrupted David.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, finish your thought.
If they could do this, the open space development standards as a conditional use permit process. Only because I think that gives a little more flexibility for that ability to do the waive. I saw a little thing about waiving something.
yeah,
And I was getting nervous about having that, but not necessarily in the standard of, to me, a conditional use permit, you can do that if you satisfy those conditions.
Well, except that the requirements for a conditional use permit are basically those that say it's consistent with everything in the abutting area and.
Well, it would be in harmony with the open space ordinance that this conditional use permit is prefaced from. It wouldn't go into the base ordinance. It would just be this overlay of the open space ordinance that the conditional use permit of an open space development would happen. But
Well,
again, I
then,
just
is
throw that
it
out.
mandatory or not?
I don't think it's mandatory.
Well, an open space development is mandatory if it's over 20 acres. So why would they
Yes.
need a conditional use permit?
That, to further the development standards. Because you kind of go from the zoning ordinance of, okay, it satisfies the zoning ordinance, now you can go over to the planning board and do the open space development standards. I would just do it as a process of a conditional use permit process.
Okay.
But, and again,
Okay.
it just tweaks it a little bit more, I think, for getting a more flexible, I might say, or an accommodating plan. And it's only because there was one thing I saw in here about a waiver, and I was like,
Yeah, there are some provisions
Right,
that the
right,
planning
right,
board
right.
can waive. Well, the planning board can waive anything in the
Right,
development
right,
regulations.
anything.
right, I know.
So,
But they were kind of minor points, though. They were things like, the buffer along the edge of the property and stuff like that. It wasn't
yeah.
Yeah,
Major.
well, it was, actually it's in the zoning ordinance, this, to encourage flexibility and create consistent with the open space development concept, the planning board may waive the requirements of the zoning ordinance for frontage, yard, lot size, and density standards.
Yeah.
So that's almost really doing a variance of the zoning ordinance.
And that's.
Those details, that's all.
Yeah, and that's in order to, because otherwise, if you can't waive those,
And I'd like to
The-
have
if
a
you-
provision for them to waive some of
Yeah.
those for some flexibility, to still wind up with the density.
But you're saying
You-
some
Allocations.
flexibility. You don't-
because you need to be able to grant that flexibility, so this is almost, instead of a conditional use permit, this is saying that for open space development, that underlying zoning of, an acre and
Right.
100 feet of frontage can be waived,
Okay, varied,
it can be
yes.
varied.
Right, yes.
Well, I think we're coming back to the fact that I think that whole provision should probably be taken out, because if it's not, we do it in the development regs, we
Yes,
allow that
that's
flexibility.
correct.
So why would we have, a
Really shouldn't be
separate-
in the zoning
Okay.
ordinance. Yeah, I would
Okay.
feel a lot comfortable with that
If
'Cause
that flexibility was in
in
the
your
regs, not the
development.
ordinance.
Yes.
But, if the yard requirements are set forth in the zoning ordinance in your table of
Dimensional
dimensional
requirements.
tables, you can't, planning board cannot waive them in its development regs unless the ordinance gives the planning board the authority. So you need something that connects the ordinance to the regs if you want that waiver, which is what I think I'm looking at 5.25.9, the
Yeah,
last
yeah,
clause
yeah.
is intended to do, to provide a standard, including a finding, and that's reasonable. You should have, on the last clause in 525.10, except as approved by the planning board, perhaps a similar
I don't,
condition.
now we're contorting ourselves, because we have a specific provision in the development regs that allow reduction of lot size and blah-de-blah, and so.
But how does the planning board grant itself in its regs the authority to change the zoning ordinance? Well, they do it, but they're not supposed to. So I think the ordinance has to, the zoning ordinance, which is voted on by the voters, has to give them that authority. Unless you just want to seize the power, which you might, the planning board has done. So I think
Okay, so
I-
leave in to be,
you leave in something that gives in the zoning the authority, then the regs, the planning board in its regs can set forth what those standards might be. But since it's planning board's regs, as you point out, they can probably waive them all the time anyway,
Right.
based on. Colleen, you're looking very quizzically,
No,
thoughtfully.
I'm just thinking if there's, a better way to
No,
because I agree, with tying it, but I can understand Bruce's suggestion. I don't know that a conditional use permit, but I think that the process of upon a finding, the granting of the waiver will promote the objectives.
I think
Like,
that.
what is the, how do you come to that finding, I guess is the.
Well, I don't mind giving the board some wiggle room, but the requirement of a finding is at least you have to create a record for it.
Okay,
And it's not because we like the applicant,
yeah.
even though in fact it probably is. I have a small question. May I ask it now? I'm going to ask it anyway. 5.2.3, the second line, zoning districts in having a lot size of 10 acres or larger. Do you mean apparent lot size or any? Separate mandatory, which comes from the parent.
Where are you? I think I'm lost.
5.23, 5.25.3.
Having a parent lot size.
I may be wrong, I'm not sure, just, you've got a big parent lot, and then parent lot over some size, and then the smaller lots that are created under the old scheme followed whatever the taint was, so they couldn't be further subdivided. But-
So, isn't that, I had a question about that, no, I don't know what page I wrote it on. So it's really, an open space may only be approved on a parent lot located in those districts and having a lot size of 10 acres or larger, 20, and I think the regs say that essentially 20 and over, it's mandatory, but you can get approval if it's over 10.
Okay, on any lot,
Right,
not just a parent lot.
well,
Any existing, and so the ordinance as it's written today says parent lot, and being a lot that was in existence prior to a date in 1990 and probably whenever the ordinance was originally. I think that any existing lot of record that's 10 acres or more, if you're a lot of record right now, that's more than 10 acres. So, then you could do an open space subdivision on that lot, the way that this is written, cause
With
it's not saying a
permission.
parent lot, with permission, yeah, you need to, but because the current ordinance was, the current ordinance has that parent lot distinction, but the parent lot is, and I think it's more of an administrative, how do we, does staff, go back to 1990? So any lot as it existed on March 11th, 2003, so is a parent lot. So today, if it's a lot that didn't exist at 10 acres or more prior to 2003, so if you've done a subdivision on, if you had a lot that you subdivided in, 2005, you just did a traditional subdivision, and now that lot is, maybe it's 12 acres today, maybe it was bigger in 2000 and before it was subdivided. Under this, that's not a parent lot that was in existence prior to 2003, so you couldn't do an open space subdivision on that. Right?
Separate permissive versus mandatory. And we required, what we didn't want to do is have people subdivide lots, parent lot into small lots, and then say they've avoided the mandatory open space.
Okay, so that was to avoid, so you didn't want people to be avoiding open space
Right,
by subdividing and then,
correct.
okay,
But do you still need that? I don't know.
I don't know if
I
that's
don't
a
know why we
concern.
need that anymore. I mean, you've got 525.4 regarding the mandatory use, and it talks about any subdivision or division of land, including lot line adjustments that create additional development, must use open space design in the ag and conservation districts if the lot size is 20 acres or larger, and then you get your permission. There'll be no more than 5 lots, you don't need to do open space, or if all the lots have a minimum of 10 acres.
And that's existing language.
That's existing
Yeah.
language. So is that enough now,
Well,
or do we
but-
need to go
so-
back to parent
So
lots and 20?
I've got a 40-acre lot. I divide into 2 20-acre lots. And then I divide each of those into 2 10-acre lots. And then I come in on each of those 10-acre lots and say, these are all under 20 acres, so I don't have to do any open space.
Why would we care? They're all
Well,
gonna be at least 10 acres.
Well, but when I first did my subdivision, my goal was to carve a lot of little traditional lots, so how do I get there from there? And I do a sequence of subdivisions,
Right.
Yeah,
and that was what we were trying to prevent.
Which the Conservation Commission is always asking, what do you plan, you know, when they come in with
Yeah.
a conceptual, we're saying, what are you really planning with the
yeah,
use of?
what's happening with the remainder of this? Yeah.
But our asking that doesn't mean anything.
I know, I understand
If you
what
believe the
Jim is
answer, I'll sell
saying.
you a bridge in Berkman, but that's a different issue.
I
Yeah.
promise we won't do anything.
Yes, I know, that's what I, yeah.
Anyways, that was the
Yeah.
intent of the parent lot
That
requirement.
Right.
makes sense. I don't know if that's, if that's a problem that we anticipate is still needing a solution,
Oh,
or if it's.
well, I'm not sure that the problem has gone away.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
I mean, people will still, if our goal is to require open space or a limited number of exceptions, which is set out in 525-4, we want to be able to hold people to that.
I did not grab the other bag, which I needed to do, but I can't imagine that we would be able to mandate that somebody who had a lot that had been subdivided after 2003, that had 20 acres, and they didn't, I don't know, if that's the definition, I'd be, first of all, open space usually is cheaper and a better deal for the developer, so I don't really know what we're arguing over. But I can't imagine that we could hold them to requiring this type of a development as compared to something they might want to do that had 10-acre minimum lots. I can't imagine that would hold up in today's environment. And I'm not sure why we would care. I mean, I actually looked at this, and one of my notes was, our zoning laws provide for lots as small as, the biggest lot is 2 acres agricultural and 5 acres conservancy. And we get, you know, there are people who complain about the 5 acres, which is a fair amount of property. So, I mean, is the 10-acre really a good requirement anymore or not? I don't know.
Personally, I would strike both the exceptions. I keep it at 20 acres, and if they want to do a less than that, ask for variance, I guess.
Well, what we were intending when we passed this, if I recall, is the good old boy had his tract, and he intended to subdivide and give land lots to his kids. And we didn't want to make it so they couldn't. And I think that's fair, because under the theory that no ordinance, no whatever its goals, you're not going to get 100% of your goal, and it's a political world, so you didn't want to antagonize them. So we made it so you could create some amount of individual lots. And what's his name up on, he used to be on the planning board and he was a shop teacher. he had a bunch of land, he'd just sell a lot every year, you know what I'm talking about.
I can see the plans in
Yeah,
front of my
yeah.
eyes.
Who
And,
stripped the map,
No, it's overrun.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah,
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
And, you know, and we concluded, in fact, that's not bad, because they weren't track houses, and each lot would
Yeah.
be, look different, and so, okay.
But in that case, what he was doing, they were trying to avoid building a road.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are other things they were trying to.
Right,
Yeah, it wasn't perfect, but we didn't wanna create opposition by saying you can't do that to some of the, so that's a reason we created exceptions. And I think generally exceptions have worked for the same reason you just said, you get a 5-acre lot, you've accomplished a lot of your goals. And arguably, you get a 2-acre lot, you may still, but. Anyway, I'll stop talking.
Hmm.
For a minute. But the question is, as residents, do we
Yeah.
retain
Do we
parent
retain the
lot?
parent lot language? Does anyone have an opinion on the parent lot language?
Well, the way this is stated, currently on this document, it just says the parent lot, it doesn't talk anything about specific dates or anything like that, it's just a reference to, starting with this.
It's
Yeah.
defined somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's defined in the current ordinance, so, and it's deleted in this, but if we were to put it back in, then it would be a lot as existed on March 11th, 2003, and that was the date the original open space ordinance went into effect. So I think we'd still be okay to reference that date, and to retain that.
I think if we get down to this as the only issue we're arguing, we're trying to decide on what to do, we're doing
We're
a
in
good
great
job.
shape.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, that's an issue.
Okay, we'll look at that.
Yeah, are there any other contexts in development or zoning where the parent lot comes into effect, or is that only defined for this ordinance?
It's defined, in the current ordinance, it's defined in the open space section. I would need to do a search just to see, I don't know if there are any other, for the purposes of this section it's defined, I don't think there's another, parent lot definition.
I don't recall that, I think we made that up.
I'm just marveling over the alphabetical nature
It's on
of. Go,
page-
because we started to do lot, remember we did
Yeah,
lot of record, lot, yeah, so it's not,
yeah,
okay.
So I guess what I'm struggling to understand is why the date has any meaning anymore. Parent
For
lot's the parent
grandfather
lot.
purposes. You gotta set a date where you're measuring.
and like you said, for, I'm sure to appease voters at the time when this was originally passed, so folks could say, okay, well, my lot was in existence, and so I'm,
Barbara raises a different question of an existing lot, can we change rules? I think you can, because you can change minimum lot sizes anytime.
Right.
So I don't see that as a problem, but somebody will squawk.
David, do we wanna go back to your,
Oh,
as
well,
we've taken the discussion,
well, the question I was gonna ask were on the other document, and the discussion shifted to this document, so if you wanna finish
Okay.
this document first.
okay,
I have a question. You have, minimum open space, in the current ordinance, there's for R1, R2, it's 40%, conservation agriculture, it's 50, and you put 50 for both. Was that a reasoned decision, or is it just,
it's a shot in
Easier.
the dark.
is there a reason where you thought 50?
50 seemed to be consistent with what the other town ordinances, the other municipalities that we've looked at, and I didn't know or didn't feel strongly that there's a justification for why it should be a different open space
That's fine.
requirement in the conservation agricultural versus R1 and R2.
Okay, I'm not arguing, I just.
Yeah, no, it was just a consistency thing.
I'm just curious. I guess I keep thinking of our town I mean, Canarville is part of Goffstown.
Yeah.
But do we have large tracts of land that, or is, this is a whole different development plan for?
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything, so if you need to have 10 acres,
I
to
think there's an
do,
11-acre parcel right on the
By
left as
St.
you
A's.
drive in. It's-
Up by
there's a
St. A's,
house.
you get-
Oh,
Fire
that corner,
trucks.
oh.
But what
well,
zone
the
is it?
corner, but
Thing.
that's
No,
not
it's the
commercial.
R2.
If it's R1 or R2, then
Yeah.
But it could be
Yeah.
open space.
I mean, they built a new house on it, and it was a shock to everybody when it was 11 acres, but they just built a house on it.
We're talking when you
Well,
go
I'm
up,
not, it's, there,
on-
I know of a lot in Penarville that has a house that's, if we're
Okay.
asking if there
There-
are large lots, there are.
a few.
yeah,
There's-
a few, not predominant, but a few.
But we're not requiring them. In our experience on some of the smaller ones early on, was the open space was so minimal, wasn't worth it.
Yeah, yeah, which is why keeping the 10-acre minimum to do open space, because if you've got a 5-acre lot, what are you really getting in the value for the open space on that? It's not necessarily gonna meet the, purpose and objectives that we're trying to accomplish.
And the reality is, there's nothing that prevents you for doing a bigger lot in a zone than is required, so. I mean, you don't have to do 2-acre lots in agricultural, you can do 5-acre lots or 7-acre lots, so.
I'm sure somebody has once.
No, actually, quite a few of the open space ones are 5 acres or more in the agricultural. I was going through the town GIS and looking at different subdivisions and just seeing what kind of lot sizes have we created. And one big caveat I wanna throw out to everybody, if you do this, you may not be able to believe the numbers, because you're looking at a subdivision, you have these little lots, and you click on them, and they say 2.5 acres.
And
You go to the next street up, and there's a lot that's like 4 times bigger, and you click on it, it says 1.2 acres.
It's because when
And it's in the cards too, I mean,
That's-
went the next step.
the assessing department, the open space land, they assign, so maybe my lot itself is 1 acre, but I is one house out of 20 in an open space development. I also am assigned 1/20th of the open space area, and the assessing department, like, puts then my lot that's 1 acre is really, 2.5 acres, because they're attaching some of that open space to my parcel for valuation
But not
purposes.
consistently among
But
the
not
subdivisions.
apparently consistently among every, but that's the,
Well, but
that's
some
why.
of those
It might
were
depend
formed
on
and
how
there
they
was
were-
an
Yeah, so-
HOA at the time,
Yeah, it might
so
have
it
been
really
formed in
was a
the
separate
HOA,
lot.
so it really was a separate, so there are different
The
situations,
old
but,
ones,
but
yeah.
that's why when you're clicking through, cause I found the same thing, and it's just and I wanna say that it's because they were probably approved under different scenarios with a true HOA versus, assigning a piece of that open space to every parcel. But, yeah, so, can't believe
You made a
So-
comment on the zoning ordinance.
Yep.
On the second one, which was pertaining to 5.25.10, dwelling units or lots, with a question on that.
yes, so I'd like some input then on, yeah, so the density determination, and I think
We're in appendix E,
we're,
No,
no,
this was in the zoning ordinance
the zoning,
itself.
under the density determination, the number of dwelling units permitted in the open space shall be no greater than the number of units that would be possible if the parent parcel, but I had a kind of
question is-
comment
or comment, units versus lots.
Yeah,
Right.
so should the density determination be the number of units or the number of lots? And-
Lots.
But then you get duplex.
Cause then you could get a lot with 2 units on
With
it,
Right.
duplexes.
Doesn't
right,
require a
yeah.
subdivision.
yeah.
There's a lot of that going on now.
Yeah, right.
So we think instead of number of dwelling units, it should be the number of lots, or you said lots emphatically, but I think then that means we could have lots with multiple dwelling units. And as long as that's the intent, because you can
But-
on a if you approve
But the
a,
yield plan. We're talking about the yield plan. And so, not the open space plan. So,
Go on.
the yield plan is supposed to be developed in accordance with the standards of the underlying district. So if the minimum size for a unit in conservation is 5 acres,
but you could put 2 dwelling unit, you could put a duplex on a 5-acre lot.
Yeah.
but,
How do you count that in the yield plan?
Yeah,
That's what you're,
so.
yeah, so I'm,
In the
so
yield
why?
plan, you're saying 1 unit per lot, so you're
Right.
saying lots
Right,
and 1 unit per lot.
right.
They could show though that they can do 50 lots, which they could theoretically get 2 units per lot, get 100 units. So we just
Well,
wanna be,
I have
we
something
wanna
that
be
I worked
clear
up in
if
conjunction
it's,
with that.
if it's
'cause-
units or lots, and I just wanna make sure that we are using the right thing and that we're conveying it accurately so that we're getting the calculation done correctly, which was why, thank you, and that's part of the reason why I sent the
Well,
red
yes, I
line,
know,
because I had
right.
some of those comments on the side.
And I can see that, to me, it's
Yeah.
kind of, you gotta be clear as what you're defining, because the dwelling units that are permitted by the zoning ordinance has that additional allowance. It's not just a single family in the agricultural and the conservation. You can do the 2-family, it looks like. So, now, they might say, okay, on my yield plan, we're gonna get that number, of course, because we wanna be able to provide 80, even though we can do 40, and that's what we're gonna do. But we could do 80, because the ordinance allows us to do 80. So they're gonna take that maximum number and show that, well, we want 80 for our density, because the zoning ordinance says that we're permitted to use that. We don't really intend to do it, but we wanna get all the exceptions and get the densities allowances, so. I think it's clearer for total, the true density is units. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, how many units are on that parcel? Well, could be 1, could be 2.
All right, how is it interpreted now?
The maximum number of dwelling units per buildable acre for duplex and multifamily lots. In the agricultural zone, you can do a .8 dwelling unit, note 3. Notwithstanding maximum density, a 2-family dwelling is allowed if the lot is both 3 acres. It does bump it up a minimum, because it's 2 acres in the agricultural, and 300 frontage.
So what does that mean for duplexes in open space?
Yep, right, I know, that's,
Well, then if you're defining this to units, then presumably that would pick up that extra requirement. Where it
Right.
had to be 3 acres instead of 2 acres, because you're going by the units rather than the lot.
But I think at this point now, the yield plan work is screaming because because most of these lots do not have water and sewer, which is why this doesn't come up very often. I
Right,
mean, we
sure.
don't see very many
Yeah.
yield plans when we see them that have duplexes on them. But if you're going to do a yield plan based on duplexes or whatever is allowed in the district, then I think you really need to establish the feasibility of that development, because you can throw
right,
on paper, on what are essentially non-engineered drawings,
Mhm.
duplexes on every lot. So,
The current density determination is a yield plan showing that the net density is no greater than what's permitted for
Right.
conventional, and it, based finding that proposed dwelling units is within the density requirement. So currently, it says dwelling units, but what's been in practice, I think, has been
lots,
lots.
because of that reason.
Yeah.
So you think the language here is accurate, is
I-
sufficient?
I mean, if we wanna change it to the number of lots permitted in an open space development is no greater than what would be permitted if it was subdivided in a conventional manner, then they're doing the lot development, they're
Not
identifying the
counting
number of
the
lots
units, yeah.
and not the units in particular. I don't know
I-
if, yeah,
This is the purpose of the yield plan.
yeah.
Which we're not talking about
I know.
Yeah.
I don't wanna create a system, we've done this in the past, You inadvertently create an incentive for duplexes by, and I don't want that.
Yeah.
It's good, if you recall back in the eighties, there was a epidemic of duplexes, cause there was a hole in the ordinance that let them be built on the same size lot. So I'm a little hesitant,
Yeah.
talking about lots. And
Well, I mean, we already know that we're now going to be, like, a detached ADU could be allowed on every single one of these lots that we create, so that's,
Which also
I think
takes to
it's gotcha.
slightly bigger lot requirements, but
yeah.
I'm sorry, you said you're allowing a detached
So,
unit
The
on-
the
State law.
accessory dwelling unit changes in the state law that,
it. Every
Basic-
residential
every
lot can
residential
now become a two
can have an,
dwelling
Two
unit
units.
lot.
yeah, an accessory dwelling unit, and we have to allow detached, they may be detached, so we
detached
can't
one.
restrict that they
Two
need to be.
detached units.
and the towns have no say. This has been decreed by the state.
Yep.
by your legislators, particularly ones from Goffstown.
Well, so there isn't a perfect answer, it just feels like defining it by units is a little safer,
A little safer, okay.
given that there is other language that says, well, it's gotta be 3 acres if it's a duplex
Right.
instead of 2, so
Okay,
Which,
that's better, it may not be perfect, but it's
Mhm.
better than,
and it should
relying
be
on lot.
further defined as a requirement in the yield plan for the number of units as well. To tie it together, to say, okay, we're allowed the X amount for the zoning ordinance, so there's the base, here's our yield, we don't exceed that, but based on this creative open space
I
development.
think what we just said, they're gonna say, well, I can put an ADU on every lot, therefore I can have 2 units. Now, you're gonna make me
It's a big lot.
have that many lots now, as individual houses, and keep going the other way.
Courtesy of the state has created that by the new rule.
Correct,
Right?
unless you defined dwelling units to exclude ADUs.
In an open
Which
space
we could
in
development.
an
do.
open space,
In a yield
For
plan.
purpose of the
for
yield
the
plan.
purpose of the yield plan.
Yeah.
Okay,
Through the looking glass and Humpty Dumpty defining words.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. So you have some control.
yep.
Knowing that they can come in later and put in a.
The- Yeah, they can come in later and add an accessory dwelling unit, and
Right,
that's
building
fine, cause the
permit,
statute
yeah.
allows, but at least for the purposes of determining what the permitted density is,
Right.
ADUs are not part of that calculation, we'll,
So
That's
if they
one which is
came in
I
with
don't,
a,
I wonder, I'll have to look at the state law. I wonder if the state law requires in an open space development that you allow an ADU. Because the underlying lot is not
I don't know.
a zoned,
I don't know what the
I think it's
RSA
any
is.
lot
remember?
I haven't,
Allows a residential.
I just
use.
cry, I don't read.
Yeah,
I think it was any lot that allows residential use, I think.
I'm pretty sure,
Yeah,
but I haven't actually read the
Right, right.
enacted.
Well, so if somebody wants to come in with a second house to put on their lot, they'd have to go to ZBA, don't they? They go to the planning board,
They go to the building department.
the building department.
not for an ADU. A second dwelling unit on a primary
Pre-exist-
principal, right,
right,
lot. You've got an
right.
existing house,
Yes,
and you wanna put another
right,
large house.
right.
If it's not, if there's another house, an ADU has square footage requirements, so if
I think
you
it's
stay
1,000 square
within,
feet.
yeah, they
1,000 square
increased
feet.
it, it's like
So
1,000.
you have to have this cloud over this ADU of, okay, this substandard size-wise or smaller dwelling unit is an ADU. I don't need any boards, all I need is a building permit. I have to satisfy, I think, setbacks, but
Right, but the building department
use-wise, it's
approves
fine,
those.
it's permitted by right.
But do you have to also determine well and stuff like that too?
Yeah,
if they're-
do, yeah,
I mean, if you're in an area that they have,
and septic or
Yeah.
leach field,
Yeah, but
right,
we
right.
don't have any say over that, that's
No,
state.
it's all state, right, exactly.
But
Now, if it's over that minimum or maximum that the ADU defines as an EDU, now it's a second principal primary use. That most likely is gonna need a variance from the, because it's on one lot. There's too many dwelling units on one lot, but that would need to get a variance. That's my opinion.
It's 674-72. Have a look at.
Okay, thank you.
Did they rewrite it, or did they just add on?
It's hard to tell,
Statute.
you have to read it.
Yeah.
The wording would be, dwelling units defined as primary structure and not ADUs or other accessory dwelling units or something like that. Exclusion. Are we done?
Other thoughts or comments on open space on the
Zoning ordinance?
ordinance part?
If we were to go back then
Zoning
to
ordinance.
the board with our recommendation, I would write it something like this. We've looked at a whole bunch of ordinances. None of them is perfect, and they all involve some compromises. We were very smart when we wrote our open space ordinance, because we were one of the first, and now that we've looked at them all, we think it's probably as good as any and better than most. So we're not inclined to make major changes
Yeah.
in the ordinance, but we will look at tweaks to the regulations to accomplish it, but we're still retaining the initial principles. We're still pondering parent lot, but other than that, I think that's
Yeah,
where we come down.
there's not significant changes
But I
in
think
in the ordinance, and I think that's a great way to
that's how I
describe
would
it.
present it, or at least we
Yep.
haven't agreed to any significant changes. Each
Yeah.
of us has our own little
Yeah.
thing we like to do, but we haven't got a consensus on it, which is fine. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the underlying principle of the open space development ordinance was if you had a lot 20 acres or bigger, you needed to do it, and you could do it if you had a lot more than 10, under certain circumstances, that was,
Then we're not letting you do little ones anymore.
right.
Yep.
And the issues that come up in regards to the implementation are more related to the development regs than the zoning ordinance. I mean, I think that's a fair, very fair statement.
Yep. Right, we wanna look at, regs. This significant, not really significant, but the changes here are, and I think and I'll tell you, you can figure out the point where I started to peter out and, but, I guess I would wanna jump to the back, which is where I spent most of the time on starting at item N with the open space standards. And our previous development regs had a lot of focus on
Thank you.
what if the open space was in trying to define if it was gonna be recreational open space or other. Wasn't focused on defining if it's agricultural or recreational or just non-disturbance
No, it was-
open
It
space.
was active recreation.
Yeah, active
I
recreation.
put a question mark, define.
Yeah, well, what's active, it's just, but, so I, under these standards, was focused more on what can be included in the open space calculation and what we're trying to protect, and setting some minimum standards for what should not be, or, so. I started with our 50% of the gross tract area, which is from the ordinance, I don't know if it needs to be repeated. But I set a requirement, and I'd be open to know what other resource areas we may want to require be in the open space.
My question on that, number
Yeah.
2, is why do you require those in the open space? Isn't the goal to establish a large area of open space, 50% of the total gross,
Yep.
of which X% is usable land?
Yes.
And
but-
what else is included in that? Why do we care?
So I think that, and this was, I guess, David's been rubbing off on me
Oh my
in
God.
his, I know, it's a little scary, in his, what I heard, and maybe I misheard, but what I was thinking was that one of the priorities in this is making sure that we're preserving those sensitive resource areas. So we know we want to preserve some good buildable area. We don't want the junk areas, and I'm gonna call wetlands junk areas that are non-buildable. We don't want it all to be junk wetlands that are preserved, but we do wanna make sure that we're not, that we are protecting those wetlands. And so,
But
this was cause they can't build in wetlands, but if we end up with pocket wetlands in everyone's backyard, then we're gonna be slowly degrading those water resources.
But let's say you put your 50% in,
Yeah,
and then the remaining land does have pockets of wetlands. By requiring those also to be
you're
in
getting more than your 50%.
haven't you made the whole thing, a greater portion, unbuildable? Because you're requiring all the little pockets to be put in. Isn't that
You're
gonna
gonna
be?
wind up with effectively more than 50% of your lot
Yeah,
area.
and-
50% is the minimum, and there's gonna be more than that.
And imagine
in the
that these
protected
are
area.
scattered throughout the tract.
That's not inconsistent with other towns, though.
Really? Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm happy with it, it's just, I
Yeah.
just trying to think, how do you do that?
Well, and that's
Everywhere you have a
where,
little, let's say you have a vernal
Yeah.
pool with nothing else around it, it's a wetland, but it's separated by buildable land, does that now have to be within, although disconnected from the open space, part
But
of the rest of
remember,
the
if we
open space?
think back to our yield plan, and that's, again, some discussion, those areas would have impacted the developability of the underlying lot, right? So if you don't include them, you almost give a bonus to people for area, because on a yield plan, they wouldn't be being able to be near all these things or going through them.
Well, this is why, my position in the beginning actually is slightly different from what you stated.
Yeah.
My position was that going the way we currently do with 50% of the buildable area, after you've taken these unbuildable areas out, gives us the best yield as far as protecting resources and keeping down costs. Not 50% of the gross tract area. And, because there's other things in this document where you talk about, well, we don't want too much of it being, of the open space being undevelopable land. Well, if you're right up front, you're saying 50% of the buildable area, you've guaranteed that result. Whereas this approach, you're not guaranteeing it other than the 25% requirement thing.
yeah,
So I still think the way we currently do it, based on buildable area, is more effective. And you're always gonna have some tiny little pocket wetland
Yeah.
in somebody's, I mean, it's
And-
just,
and
there's
there
no
will
way to
be,
it.
and that's
You
where,
can't achieve production
you
at that
know,
level.
And that's where there is and I don't like this language, but it came from another community, we had something similar. The demonstrating it would constitute an unusual hardship, I didn't think hardship is a bad,
Our Supreme
so,
Court has done
so
away with
that needs to
concept.
be, but if we're allowing that the planning board can modify this, or, it's not, I suppose, can waive this requirement where there is a justification or a purpose. So if there were a reason, it is because of, segmentation or separation, or, that it would not be creating contiguous open space, or that could be waived by the board. But, yeah, that unusual hardship, language is not.
Right. I think it's creating more of a headache than you need to, but.
You think so?
I mean,
By what?
Habitat areas of endangered or threatened species, well, what does that mean?
Well, also,
I mean, I
something,
can identify a limited area, but is that all across town? I mean,
Well, isn't that a pretty specific
is that a desert?
endangered or threatened species? Aren't there definitions for that?
there are,
Yeah,
and, typically they're pretty much focused on the wetlands as far as Goffstown is concerned. We don't have, I can't think of a single upland habitat area for an endangered species, other than the whole area
That's right,
is a habitat. I mean, you could say that the whole entire lot, parent lot is.
That's my point.
So-
Okay, yep.
well, I thought that there needs to be a specific finding that this inhabits the area and is in fact endangered, and, I mean, it's not just,
Well, you could say, okay, we have identified there are Blandings turtles in this parent lot. There's no definition in the state saying, and this is how many square feet they need around the wetland or anything like that. It's very weak and very vague at the state level.
silly, but I was thinking that we could rely on them for definition and
Silly.
guidance.
I don't disagree with the concept of what you're doing, I just think
Yep.
you're creating an
Making
unworkable.
it to, it,
And something like the slopes above 25%, yeah, we don't want building on that. But, if the back side of their lot starts going up into a slope, well, they're not gonna put the house there.
yeah.
So doesn't seem like a big deal.
Well, but 5,000 square feet of a contiguous area is a pretty big area. It's not all steep slopes, it's the large steep slopes.
Yeah.
So I don't have
I think you're really talking about like the Bobcat that has an area of 150 miles or something, I mean, I think,
Well, that's the whole town, so.
okay. But so I think but should you try and clarify that these are for smaller, or not, just smaller animals?
Well, I still think that if you start with the 50% of the buildable area instead of gross tract area, that these areas that you're listing specifically are just naturally going to fall out into the open space as they currently do, because you can't build it in the wetland, so they're not gonna put the house lot in the wetland.
But I guess the point is that if you're getting the density,
Mhm.
what you're doing is saying you couldn't build on this lot because you have these things, so we're gonna let you put them in to the open space area, which is supposed to be in some way usable, and you still get the density.
No, your density is reduced because you've taken out these unbuildable areas. So you started with 100, now you're down to 75 because you took out 25 acres of unbuildable. And now you're taking half of that buildable as open space as well, so I think the numbers work out to you're not giving them more, you're giving them less.
Well, I guess you're giving them less buildable area, but they're still getting the density.
Well, if they have less buildable area, then it's a lower number of lots or units.
Well, I guess it depends on this lot size, so let me
Yeah.
just sort
Yeah.
of go back to
Yep.
the lot size. On
Yep.
page 2, the lot size, so I have a couple of comments, but the frontage, is this a change? That's why I was trying to go back and forth. The frontage may be reduced to 25% of that allowed, but no less than 50 feet. Did that used to be 50? I can't, even with
I think
reading
the
glasses, I can't read
frontage-
this.
I don't,
The frontage is the same.
So currently it can be reduced to 25%?
Currently, it can be reduced to 25% and no less than 50 feet.
But
So
that's
the
not part of the
frontage,
yield plan.
No,
no, this is just for like
Yeah.
your lots.
Yeah, no,
But
we were just talking
What
about
I
the lots.
changed was increasing it, so the no smaller than, so the actual lot size itself, currently, 10,000 square feet with on-site water and sewer, 5,000 where, you've got municipal water and sewer. So I raised those from 10 and 5 to 15 and 10.
Okay,
So that way, it's not you've got your 2 acre lot size neighbors in a 5,000 square foot.
well,
lot.
we have that
Which-
pretty close to that now.
Yeah,
But, so the frontage of 20, the problem is that you can do this, we sort of have this ordinance for everywhere, R1, R2.
yeah,
And the reality is, we're talking about agricultural and conservation district for these districts to get a big enough lot. I mean, there are exceptions, but, so when you talk about a reduction of 25 to 25%, that is a huge difference. If you're in a conservation or agricultural area, dropping that frontage to 25% is a huge difference in the character of the adjoining neighborhood. So I flipped to page 1, where we talk about consideration, the board in considering the yields plan's feasibility will consider F, the resulting character of the proposed lots and their compatibility with their immediate neighborhood. I'm not sure what immediate neighborhood means.
And that was gonna be my first question back at the very
Okay, so we're
beginning.
back here. And the engineering practicality and the financial feasibility, which I'm thrilled about, and I have something for that. But, I mean, those two things look like they were not in the current plan, and
They
I
were
actually
not.
liked them.
So my question is, what is that, how is that actually defined? You're talking about the resulting character and their compatibility with the immediate neighborhood. What does that
That's-
mean, the compatibility?
that's the
Who's,
challenge, and that's in the current
And-
ordinance.
Oh, it is?
That's in
Okay.
the current,
Mhm.
not the current ordinance, that's in the current development regulations. So this is the section where I had petered out and was like, all right, we'll just take what we have, figure out what's terrible for
But-
this
but
first
most
part. But
Special
that's where,
exceptions standards
the
include
character,
that.
yeah, the character thing is, but that's something where, how do you, I can't see the planning board saying, well, you know what, these lots are a little bit smaller, a little bit different than the development next door, so we're denying it. I just don't know
Doesn't
how
make
you,
sense.
you know, how you enforce
Because
that
it's going to be
standard.
different than the,
Yeah.
It's going to be different, but I
I
think
have
that
an
that's
idea
where,
on it.
yeah.
But anyways, go, all
Yeah.
right, so, because, you know, I think that we all sort of have looked at other ordinances, and, you know, we can't do too much screaming about ours, and, because it's not that far off. The yield plan is at the bottom, but just so, these are a couple of things that I came up with when I was reviewing these, is I have found that there are some communities that authorize open space development with a special permit. I don't know that we need to get there, because I think we allow it and require it, so I just, and I cut off that last sentence, so I apologize for that. in regards to the feasibility of the development, there are some communities who have open space development, not necessarily in New Hampshire, that have required the conceptual and that there be a landscape architect that basically is the one that sort of has a lot to do with the conceptual, and then when the actual open space development comes in, it needs to be consistent with the conceptual that was presented and discussed, so there's no bait and switch that what you've seen. And this person would have to, on behalf of the applicant, identify the primary conservation areas, this goes to the 50% and what's included and not, locate the house sites and where are any shared amenities and what are the actual private lots gonna be. And then there's some talk about trails. I do think that the trails and the open space tend to be an afterthought in our
Yeah.
open space development, and that this would bring it up to the more of a forefront and actually provide the lot lines. So I thought it was an interesting concept, because we have our engineers coming in with the plans, sort of saying, oh, we could do this and that, and I'm not really sure that they can, and this is obviously a lot at 8:15. So the issue with the yield plan is, we have people who come in with a yield plan, and you know, sometimes it looks pretty feasible. Other times we get yield plans on lots that we can see that there's lots of fill being required, or, you know, these roads are sort of taking these little squigs that it's like, would anybody really do this, right? It's just, so how do you, when they say we can build 50 lots, consistent with G, engineering practicality and its financial feasibility, how, at what point do you say, this land isn't such that for you to take advantage of the open space ordinance, because it's a big advantage to the developers, we want an engineered, a fully engineered site plan with the financial feasibility assessment, because you're getting the advantage of not having to spend anywhere near as much on infrastructure as you would if you did a traditional development. And so what would be the trigger for requiring that? How, you know, because you can't have it just be, oh, we think, you know.
That cuts both ways under our case law. So they come in with a engineered plan. How do we counter it if we think, as the court has said, if they come in with an expert, you've got to counter them with an expert, not just see the pan.
Well, I mean, this is in conjunction with the preparation of the plan. I said that because, and I would need Scott, quite frankly, to say what qualifies as an engineered site plan, because, you know, they put their stamp on it, but it's not what DPW would be looking for an engineered site plan. So I just sort of threw these things out there to say, look, if we're having a big enough open space development that has X amount of lots, maybe we should require an engineered site plan.
Do we require or have the option to require?
I sort of took away the option, because then it becomes discretionary, which is a whole nother problem, and maybe it's not 15, maybe it's 20,
Well, I
maybe it's
think if
25.
these items that you identify trigger on the plan, then yeah, we need to go further, because these are the
Well, and that's
extremes.
sort of what I came at, so the street length, so that, if you look at the open space, some of them, the traditional plans get pretty contorted in regards to the streets, with dead ends and cul-de-sacs, and where you can go here and here and here. And so if, to get your 60 lots, you have to have 4 miles of, and I, you know, these are gross numbers and probably
Right.
not,
I got it.
well, people are watching it. If you would need 4 miles to get your 60 lots, and your proposed street for your 60 lots is less than 50% of that, then I think maybe you're probably stretching your road calculation there, and I wanna see something calculated. I sort of said, you know, do we wanna have a percentage of steep slopes or wetlands, or lots in a setback area? And, this is sort of, 5 sort of goes to the character of the lots and compatibility with immediate. If the frontage, and then I define that housing being located on the road that accesses the open space and the zoning requirements of that district. You know,
These are factors that will trigger an engineered
right,
site plan.
Yeah.
right. So, because I don't know that you should have to require an engineered site plan, but when it's a big enough development, or the yield plan versus the open space proposal are that different, then I think triggers for F and G, which actually I hadn't read before I did this.
So you're getting at what my question was going to be on these two, is what, how do you define these and what's the
Right.
trigger for them?
So that was my
Yeah.
intent.
You know, like engineering practicality, well,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Time and money, you can
Do
do
you,
anything.
Yeah.
exactly, but you define it in terms of, you know, to avoid extreme alteration of the terrain, you know, we don't consider practical for you to blast that entire ledge away or take away that
So
hill
much
or whatever, I mean,
I mean,
how you
do,
define that, I
I
don't
feel
know,
like-
but.
Which
Did we
would happen on a
see-
conventional development.
Did we see an
You
ordinance
could
that
show a
had
plan filling in all the low,
threshold, like a number?
chop.
Yeah, and we always
cut
hate
and
those
fill?
too.
right,
we did see.
because they're not going
You know, when I
around.
looked in my papers for the summary that we did,
I feel
and I
like there
couldn't
was
find the
something
summary,
that's,
and I meant to look it up on my
yeah, I've
computer,
gotta
and I
look in all
couldn't.
my, I feel like there was a community that said like that, that excessive alteration, and they sort of had a number on like how many yards of cut and fill over a, and I could just be completely making that up, but I thought that there was, I mean, but that would be a way of quantifying what's, you know, an excessive alteration of the site that would be, Barbara, one question I've got on what you, the engineered yield plan paid for by the applicant, engineer selected by the town. I don't know that we can, was there a change, in the last couple of years on engineering review and selection of a third party? Well, I guess this wouldn't be a third party, I don't know that we can select an engineer and tell them to prepare a yield plan.
I mean, that's just sort of what I put down,
Yeah.
I'd have to ask Scott, because I know we have BSB or whatever that reviews every, you know, goes
Yeah.
out to the sites to
Okay.
do,
Well, okay, so
to do
separate
compliance.
Prepared by and reviewed by.
Right,
Yeah, reviewed by we can do.
okay.
We don't.
oh, yeah, that's true.
We don't want to be drafting these things to discuss.
And,
That's what Scott's already doing, he's already designed,
and
I know, which is what we're trying to avoid.
financial feasibility seems like it could be even messier than the engineering practicality, because,
Yeah.
you know, they could say, well, yeah, I'm gonna spend all this money, cause I'm gonna build $2 million home.
that's from the current ordinance,
But we
and I
can't ask
kept
how many
it,
bedrooms.
but that's where I think we really, we're falling short, and this hasn't fixed it yet, but that's where we need
So
to.
the concept Barbara hasn't agreed with is, this should be a certain trigger for engineered
Yeah.
yield plan.
Right,
Yeah, but we're agreeing that some projects don't need it,
right.
so don't require it, or require a shortened version, which was the original concept we had when we naively started this. It would be a more of a conceptual plan, and then
Yeah.
we saw these concept plans that were just zooey.
And in reality, most of the ones that have occurred probably wouldn't have required it, cause
Yeah.
in general, most of them were,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
reasonable.
So, you know, what are the triggers without making it too complicated, and
Right.
is there some, you know, Bruce's concept of,
Right, and so
Yeah.
that, these were just some of the more obvious things, I mean, need to think about it a little
Yeah.
more, maybe see if we can, I think the cut and fill is a good point, because
Yes.
It's quantifiable.
it's quantifiable, and whether people would really deal with some of the slopes on some of the, I mean, I think we recently approved a lot that had huge slope issues. I still don't think it's developed, because I think when they got into it, they just realized it probably couldn't be
Cut
done.
and fill usually does correlate with cost of development, so
Yeah.
it's not a bad.
Well, and your
Yeah.
point about the point about blasting, I mean, that's sort of another, I mean, they can blast, but, oh, I know what the other one was, retaining walls too. If it required retaining walls over 3 feet, which goes to the cut and fill.
And slopes, right, obviously,
Yeah.
holding back the slopes.
Forgot about the retaining wall issue. Because we don't even require retaining walls to be engineered until they're at least 3 feet, I don't think, which I can't even believe, but that's what it is.
Listen, Scott would
Yeah,
have some.
yeah, at 3 feet, it's a structure, I think, it needs a building permit. and
Right,
engineered.
yeah.
I think that must be. a
So
building
anyways, that
permit.
was my attempt to deal with what, as David points out, F and G are pretty hard to,
Yeah,
Well, and another aspect of that, having those kinds of stated triggers up front, I think if you're a developer coming in on this big lot, and, you know, you think you're gonna put in a yield plan with all these massive engineering, you see those triggers and go, ah, crap, I'm gonna have to pay for all that.
yeah, yeah,
It might be an incentive to keep it reasonable.
right.
right. And so, you know, maybe you have these other things, I don't know, but this is, and I have not had a chance to have Scott look at them. But, and I know that DPW likes these because of the street length issues, that it's much
Yes.
more feasible. But on the other hand, if we're getting, you know, we want land to be developed so people can live on it, but as a community, if we're generating building that would not otherwise occur, we're not doing the community any advantage, because there are resources that we have to provide other than DPW. So anyways, but that was, and that's sort of when I was looking through the frontage issue, and I swore that there was some green outage that we had 50%, that's why I asked, because I'm like, we reduced that from 50 to 25, but you're telling me it was
It
25.
was
There's a lot of
25.
towns that have 50%.
Yeah, I think, and I was looking at it and I was like, well, I debated increasing it from 25 to 50, and now here as I am looking at, you know, what the minimum frontage of 300 feet in the conservation, like, yeah, I can see where that's, 25% of 300 feet is,
Are you back to N on page 5?
where were you?
No, I think she's talking about G on page 2.
Yeah, that's the 50 feet you were talking
Yeah.
about, right? It was the G on
Yeah.
page 2.
On her
Yeah.
unchangeable one, on this one, the appendix E that she did,
Yeah.
not the current. I don't know where it is on this marked up one.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the marked up one.
Once they told me it was all in the new, I just sort of said.
Yeah, I think 50 feet's a pretty good minimum. You don't want to go
I-
any smaller than
Oh,
that.
yeah, no.
I think it's too small.
What
well,
are you
that's
talking
even-
about now, frontage?
Frontage, and that's even 50 feet of frontage, I was like, I mean, you're talking about a 40-foot house, like, you're
Yeah.
not,
Good size ranch
50
is gonna
feet
take it
is
out.
too
Yeah.
small,
That's too long and too short.
too short.
That's 2
Yeah.
car lengths.
yeah, it's not, so that's what we currently have, 50 feet. Do we wanna raise that, and that's in the current, and I didn't increase, I was recommending increasing the lot area,
She
the
increased the
frontage,
square footage, which
I-
really deals with R1 and R2,
Yeah,
but it capped the 25% in no less than 50 feet.
which is a very short
That's
frontage,
very-
50
you know,
feet
you
is
could
very
end up-
narrow frontage.
You could end up with, you know, what do they call them in Louisville, the relatives in Louisville, shotgun houses.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're-
Separate
they're- It's a
houses.
lovely neighborhoods, but that's what they call them, shotguns.
Yeah,
Garfield has a larger lot size than
really?
that, I think. 50 feet is very small.
yeah, I wanna say, what, some of those,
I would think
like
100
the
feet
old
is
Penard,
not
like the
ridiculous. It's not.
originally platted Penardville, I think were 50 feet, but a lot of the ones in Penardville are like 3 of those 50-foot platted, or 2 of the 50-foot platted, or together, maybe it was 30 feet.
Well,
There-
and
there's-
remember, we're starting with a bigger lot. The
Piece of-
practical reality is,
Yeah.
we're not talking about R1, R2,
Yeah.
but 50
Right.
feet is
But if you're
way
in,
too small.
if you're in the R1, R2, currently the zoning ordinance says 100 feet for frontage. And you're saying, okay, we'll allow you 25% reduction of that, it's gonna be 75 feet.
But not less than, so.
But
you can
then,
still say-
you're never gonna get to 50 feet, because.
But we're not gonna,
Right.
we're not, as Barbara said, we're not, don't gear this to R1, R2.
I know,
Yeah.
that's rare,
I mean, we
it's gonna be
can-
rare.
It
Yeah.
could happen, but that's,
So, do we want, no less, I mean, no less than 75 feet?
Well, that's the 25%.
And that's the 25%, but if I'm at,
Why do we have to put in not less than 50? I don't know, it's the
Because
number,
25% of a 100-foot lot is 25 feet.
yeah, because if it was R1 or R2.
You couldn't even put
and
a
we-
driveway in.
75.
Why are we reducing a 100-foot frontage?
that's not very much.
100 feet is not very much, so why are we allowing a reduction of it? The reality is, in an open space.
I wouldn't, because when we, remember, I'm gonna sound like the old guy, he's no longer around,
Yeah.
but when we did this, we were thinking it was going to apply to R1 and R2 too, so
Yep.
we made provisions for that, but now we're concluding, no. And the few times it will, well, don't worry about it, so make it 100.
Make it 100.
It's just so small.
Then-
Because then I'm allowing to reduce from 300 to 100, or 200 to 100, because I'm at 300 in CO and 200 in agricultural,
Well,
so.
so why don't you change it to frontage may be reduced
To 50%.
50% of that allowed by the underlying zoning district, but no less than 100.
Yeah, because those,
Yeah.
our frontage
Okay.
requirements are pretty minimal.
Yep.
Very minimal.
Yep.
Of course, you can't make parking requirements anymore, so.
Yes, I was gonna ask, is that the reason for the removal of the
Well, I was removing the
parking
parking
and
requirements
shared driveway and flag
partially
lots?
because of state statute,
Right.
but also partially because we already, in other areas of the zoning ordinance, are setting what you're required for parking for a residential unit, so. I mean,
Okay,
If the zoning ordinance says you need, now the zoning ordinance doesn't matter, because state statute says we can do no more than 1 per unit, right?
so what about
Really?
the shared driveway? I know how everybody
So the
loves
shared
shared driveways.
driveway, and
It's crazy.
I feel like I've heard that we are adamantly opposed to shared driveways. We
And-
allow
and
common
yet- and
driveways,
yet
but we
approve.
don't, and we have in other.
But we have a mechanism to approve.
And so,
Yeah.
in the ordinance, there is a provision for shared driveways, so I was gonna let the open space fall to what other residential developments fall to. I don't know that there's anything unique about open space,
Gotcha.
developments that should have
Is
a
it-
different shared driveway standard.
Same,
but-
same logic for the flag lots then?
Yeah, exactly, you know, just default to,
See, I'm actually, I like flag lots. Only to maximize the back lot. But in an open
oh,
space.
yeah, yeah.
In an open space development, I think it works well, but it's hard.
Flag lots work in big lots. Your problem is open space. You don't have big lots, that's why they're doing open space.
Yeah,
Flag lots are, there's an old saying that fences make good neighbors, and flag lots create neighbors in places that are not anticipated.
I like some of those.
but I think your
Black
first
River.
point about it being, the open space is a reduced lot to begin
Yeah.
with, so the flag lots really start to fall apart there.
Yeah, yeah,
I want to go back to N when you're done.
Okay,
Flag
sure,
lot.
yep.
I just question all the math. And,
Which is a good question, because I'm a planner, math is not my strength.
yeah, well, I mean, for example, N4, at least 78% of the space shall form a contiguous area with no portion less than 100 feet, but you do require a buffer around development with a certain distance that is part of the open space, and it can be less than 100 feet when you describe it, I think. The Y on 6, it shall contain no more than 50% of the sum of the following kind of unbuildable land. But if we've set aside a certain percent of gross tract area, and a certain percentage of that has to be contiguous and a certain amount has to be buildable, why do we care what percentage of the wetland the wetland buffer is in? In fact, we said before we want the wetlands in the, because this says 50% of the sum of the following kinds of unbuildable land cannot be in the open space.
Well, that's a direct contradiction with, we want them to be in,
That's right.
Yeah.
which is
Yeah, I just don't know why you care.
Yep.
Put,
Because the point, if you read the clustered housing in open space, is that you're supposed to be promoting use of the open space by something other than animals. And so if your open space is all wetlands and steep slopes, it's not people open space.
but don't you
Which-
accomplish that by having a certain percentage of the open space has to be usable, not these?
I
Yeah.
think we accomplish all those things better by, again, going back to the 50% of the buildable area, not 50% of the gross area at the very beginning.
I don't care if all the wetlands are in the open space, as long as some amount of the open space is usable land.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right,
Right.
Correct.
But this doesn't allow that. You have to put 50% of the open space of the wetlands.
Well, so do you
Not
care
into the open
about
space.
how some, is any amount of the open space being usable sufficient, or?
Well,
So,
X percent of the open space has to be usable.
So open space is calculated, 50% of the buildable area of the lot needs to be set aside as open space. And of that open space.
that's the open space we're talking about.
And of that open space,
If you want to
50%
add
or
more,
whatever needs to be,
if you want to add more junk land to it, why do we care?
yeah.
Put it
Yeah.
all in.
we don't, and they probably will, and that would be fine.
Barbara's
But-
looking quizzical. For the
But
record.
that, I'm gonna have to leave it from this. I guess maybe that comes back to the yield plan, because what you're doing is taking all the land that would not be developable, letting them say, you get the benefit of that calculation, and we're gonna let you use all of the buildable area.
No, but we're
No.
saying
No,
no.
We're
not if-
we're
That's,
saying,
that's only if you're starting with this 50% of the gross. If you do it like we currently do, 50% of the buildable area, you're guaranteed, you got 50% of the buildable area. You're accomplishing the goal that you're trying to accomplish down there. And it's much simpler.
So I think what you're saying is not what we currently, so we say, and 50% of the buildable area, but I just lost where there's something in how that's currently being interpreted, and I think that it's maybe the current interpretation is that
confusing, or?
if I've got 100 acres and 50 acres of that are buildable, then I'm putting 25 acres in open space, but that calculation's not translating in the way that it's been reviewed recently. Do you know, I mean, knowing
Well,
that we've seen recent,
the-
I think that the calculation as it's been executed is not as simple as,
Is that a discussion you must have with your planner then?
but
Not you,
if that's your
Yeah.
starting
that's
point,
good.
then that 25% half of it's going
Yeah.
to open space, and the other
Yeah.
half is buildable, and that's all you can build
That's
it.
all you're building.
You can't build any
I'm
unbuildable.
just not
Yeah.
geared, I need to just shift gears, and I think I hear what you're saying, and I think I agree with it, but I'm just, I can't figure, the
Yeah.
math equation is not.
Yeah,
It's past my bedtime, so.
Yeah, I'm the same, and so I hear that, I agree with it, but I need to figure out why that and what you're saying, and which makes sense and I agree with, is not what's been
Done.
executed in practice. But with that said, it's 8:30 and my brain's starting to get a little fuzzy, and I think we've had some good discussion and conversation tonight, so I'm happy to, if, unless everyone has some other
Well-
burning things that we wanna hit on, is items to
For the
review
next
further.
meeting, do you want that we can look at some examples of what was done in the past, and we can resolve that, whether that's
Okay,
result is there or
Good
not?
I
ones
mean,
or bad ones?
you're saying examples
Doesn't,
that
just
we've
whatever's
done
been
here
done
in
in
the
the
Yeah,
Open
we'll
space
just look at what's been
divisions we've
done
already
in
done,
Goffstown.
under
Yes,
the old,
that's what-
Yep.
Right,
yeah. Not-
okay,
did you understand what he's saying?
yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep. Okay,
Okay.
So there are some good ones.
Huh? Well, there's some very good ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
They tended to be on the tracks that had a lot of land.
Yeah, okay, well, that's a sign.
They were big
Yeah,
tracks of
That's the
land.
ones we care the most about, though, aren't they?
I know, but we're getting them on other tracks, which is, they're not quite as wonderful.
Yeah, we've seen some pretty sketchy ones that we approved, but probably didn't.
Okay, I think Betty had an issue with Thursdays.
She had an issue with Thursdays, so if we go back to Tuesdays, and I gotta see which ones, cause Patty will yell at me if I end up trying to pick. If I can, because I only have one calendar here with me and I need to check my work calendar as well, cause I have more and more night meetings. If I can send an email to the group tomorrow, and if you can reply to me individually and not reply all, just so, so I'll check with Patty on room availability, and I'll give a couple of dates, and I think we're gonna aim for
So you're
Tuesdays.
saying a month from now?
Maybe, I
I
think
think
maybe earlier.
sooner.
When
I
does the
think might be
ZBA
better.
meet, and
What are the second?
And I will be gone the 17th through the 20th, so I hope
so we
it's
could
not
meet the
then.
16th?
I feel like
Sure.
so you meet September 2nd or
Yeah.
the second,
No,
Oh,
it's
so-
the first Tuesday.
the first Tuesday,
Yeah.
so
Oh,
it
the
might
first Tuesday?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm pretty
okay.
sure we're on
So-
the
Right
second.
after Labor Day?
either
pretty sure.
Oh, I know, that
September-
second one I didn't let, I'm gonna have a board meeting I really need to go to on the
Just send-
9th and
I-
So
we're
the
not-
9th or 16th, I'll send a couple of dates, the 16th maybe is a potential, no?
I can't,
You can't?
but
Okay.
you're not gonna get everybody
Well,
Well,
here.
try it, do Wednesdays too, to see if people can do
Let me,
Tuesday or
let me
Wednesdays
check
for a
with
couple
Patty
of
on
weeks.
the
As long as it's not the
room
last Wednesday of the month.
availability.
Huh?
Well,
Oh.
this is not the fourth
Yeah, I think we're
Wednesday.
trying to meet in the first few weeks of September though, so
Yeah.
that would be
Oh,
Yeah,
the-
we'll try to
the
do it in the
3rd,
first
the
couple
9th,
weeks
the
to kind
10th,
of
the
keep things,
16th.
cause the summer
Yeah.
Right.
is.
It's gone.
Summer's over.
What do you mean summer's
Did you
over?
wake up early this morning?
Well,
Summer's over.
I
We've,
know,
we've
cold.
got, it's still
Yeah,
like,
send out dates and then.
I'll send those out tomorrow,
But we're
and then
not
people let
gonna-
me know.
Not everybody's gonna.
we'll get as many as we can. and
I have to get
done.
home, I have a dog who came home today, having just eaten after emergency surgery Tuesday night. So I have to get home to preach.
All right, with that, thank you, everyone, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of adjourning? Aye. All right, thank you, I will send an email tomorrow and get some dates. All right.